Welcome to Technology Comparisons Crashcasts. I'm your host, Sheila, and today we're diving into a hot topic in the world of DevOps, Terraform versus Ansible. Joining me, as always, is our resident expert, Victor. Hi, Victor.
Hello, Sheila, and hello to all our listeners. I'm excited to break down these two powerful tools for our audience today.
Before we get started, let's quickly go over the prerequisites for today's episode. Listeners should have a basic understanding of cloud computing, server management, and the concept of automation in IT infrastructure. Victor, anything you'd like to add?
That's a good start, Sheila. I'd also suggest having a general idea of what infrastructure as code or IAC means, as it's central to our discussion today.
Great point. Now, let's outline what we'll cover in today's episode. We'll start with an introduction to both Terraform and Ansible, then dive into their key differences, use cases, and finally, discuss their advantages and disadvantages. But first, let's kick things off with a quiz question for our listeners. Are you ready?
Absolutely. Let's challenge our audience.
All right, here's the question. In a large-scale cloud infrastructure project, which tool would be more suitable for provisioning the initial infrastructure, and which would be better for configuring and maintaining the servers once they're up and running?
Ooh, that's a great question, Sheila. It really gets to the heart of how these tools differ and where they excel. Without giving away the answer, I think this question will make our listeners think about the strengths and weaknesses of both Terraform and Ansible. It's not just about what each tool can do, but where they fit best in the lifecycle of a project.
Exactly, Victor. Now let's start by defining our key terms. Can you give us a quick rundown of what Terraform and Ansible are?
Certainly. Terraform is an open-source infrastructure as code tool developed by HashiCorp. It allows you to define and provision infrastructure using a declarative language. Ansible, on the other hand, is an open-source automation tool developed by Red Hat. It's primarily used for configuration management, application deployment, and task automation.
That's a great start, Victor. Now, I understand that Terraform is often described as a provisioning tool, while Ansible is more of a configuration management tool. Can you elaborate on what that means?
Absolutely, Sheila. Think of it this way. Terraform is like an architect and construction crew. It's designed to create the initial structure. In this case, your infrastructure. This could be spinning up servers, setting up networks, or creating databases in the cloud. Ansible, on the other hand, is more like an interior designer and maintenance team. It comes in after the structure is built to set up the software, configure settings, and keep everything running smoothly.
That's a helpful analogy, Victor. So if I understand correctly, Terraform is used to set up the initial infrastructure, while Ansible is used to manage and configure that infrastructure once it's in place?
That's right, Sheila. However, it's worth noting that there is some overlap in their capabilities. Ansible can do some provisioning, and Terraform can handle some configuration tasks, but generally, they excel in their primary domains.
Interesting. Now, I've heard that Terraform uses a declarative approach, while Ansible is more procedural. Can you explain what that means and why it matters?
Great question. With Terraform's declarative approach, you specify the desired end state of your infrastructure. You tell it what you want, and Terraform figures out how to make it happen. Ansible, being procedural, requires you to define the steps needed to reach the desired state. It's like the difference between saying, I want a 3-tier cake, declarative, versus giving step-by-step instructions on how to bake and assemble the cake, procedural.
That makes sense. So, Victor, what are some of the key advantages of each approach?
Well, Terraform's declarative approach makes it easier to maintain a consistent state and track changes over time. It's great for complex infrastructures where you want to ensure everything is set up correctly. Ansible's procedural approach gives you more fine-grained control over the exact steps being executed, which can be beneficial for complex configuration tasks or when you need to handle edge cases.
I see. Now let's talk about some real-world implementations. Can you give us an example of when a company might choose Terraform over Ansible or vice versa?
Certainly. Let's say a startup is launching a new cloud-based application. They might use Terraform to set up their entire cloud infrastructure, creating virtual machines, setting up load balancers, and configuring security groups. Once that's done, they could use Ansible to deploy their application to those servers, install necessary software, and manage ongoing updates and configurations.
That's a great example, Victor. Now I'm curious about some common misunderstandings or pitfalls people might encounter when using these tools. Any insights?
One common misconception is that you have to choose between Terraform and Ansible. In reality, they often work best when used together. A pitfall with Terraform can be managing state across a team, while with Ansible, people sometimes struggle with managing secrets securely. It's important to understand the strengths and limitations of each tool.
Those are valuable points, Victor. As we start to wrap up, do you have any best practices or tips for our listeners who might be starting to use these tools?
Absolutely. For both tools, version control is crucial. Always keep your Terraform configurations and Ansible playbooks in a repository like Git. For Terraform, use remote state storage to collaborate effectively. With Ansible, make good use of roles and collections to keep your code modular and reusable.
Great advice, Victor. Now, before we reveal the answer to our quiz question, do you have any fun facts or anecdotes about Terraform or Ansible?
Here's an interesting tidbit. Terraform was named after the concept in science fiction of transforming a planet to make it habitable. In a way, that's what it does for cloud infrastructure. It transforms raw computing resources into a fully functional environment.
That's fascinating, Victor. Now let's reveal the answer to our quiz question. For a large-scale cloud infrastructure project, Terraform would typically be more suitable for provisioning the initial infrastructure due to its strong infrastructure management capabilities. Ansible would then be ideal for configuring and maintaining the servers once they're up and running, thanks to its powerful configuration management features.
Exactly right, Sheila. And this showcases how these tools can complement each other in a real-world scenario.
To summarize our discussion today, Terraform and Ansible are both powerful tools in the DevOps world. Terraform excels at provisioning and managing infrastructure with its declarative approach, while Ansible shines in configuration management and application deployment with its procedural methodology. Both have their strengths, and they often work best when used together in a comprehensive DevOps strategy.
That's a great summary, Sheila. I hope our listeners found this comparison helpful in understanding these two important tools.
Thank you, Victor, for sharing your expertise with us today, and thank you to our listeners for tuning in. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe to Technology Comparisons Crashcasts and leave us a rating. Your support helps us continue to bring you these in-depth tech comparisons. Until next time.